You ever stop and think about what really makes the global economy run? It turns out a lot of it comes down to this one deal. A secret agreement, really, that was struck way back in a moment of total crisis. And for the last 50 years, it has quietly shaped, well, pretty much everything. It's a wild story about oil, money, and power, and it all boils down to one single question.
So why is all the world's oil sold in US dollars? I mean, it seems simple, right? But the answer is anything but. Just think about that for a second. Oil is the global commodity. It's dug up everywhere, it's used everywhere. So why is it all priced and traded in the currency of just one country? Yeah, that was no accident. It was a very deliberate and frankly, a world-changing deal.
Okay, to really get this, we've got to rewind the clock to the early 70s. And let me tell you, the world was a mess. Just look at this chart. That spike, that's the price of oil. You know, the lifeblood of pretty much every modern country, just going completely vertical. But here's the thing. This massive shockwave didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was actually the second punch in a brutal 1-2 combo that came this close to breaking the entire global financial system.
All right, so here's the breakdown of how everything just fell apart. For decades, since 1944, the whole world ran on something called the Bretton Woods system. Basically, the US dollar was tied to gold. It was solid. It was the bedrock. But then, in '71, President Nixon just cut the cord. He severed that link. And suddenly, the dollar was just floating out there, totally vulnerable. And then bam, just 2 years later, the OPEC oil embargo hits, and the price of oil skyrockets by over 400%. So now think about the situation the world was in. You've got an unstable dollar, and the most important commodity on Earth is insanely expensive. It was a crisis. Anything had to be done.
And, out of all that chaos, a solution emerged. A very quiet, very high-level agreement. It was between the United States and, you guessed it, the world's biggest oil producer, Saudi Arabia. And this was the moment the petrodollar system was born.
So what exactly is this petrodollar system? Well, it's actually pretty simple, but the consequences were absolutely massive. Here's the deal. All the big oil countries, with Saudi Arabia leading the pack, agreed they would only sell their oil for US dollars. That's it, nothing else. In return, the US promised to provide them with military protection and economic help. Now, this deal did way more than just stabilize the dollar. Think about it. Every single country on Earth needs oil, right? So if oil is only sold in dollars, then every country on Earth now needs dollars. It created this huge, permanent, global demand for American currency, like overnight.
And this is where it gets really clever. The whole system turned into this brilliant, self-powering machine. It's like a perfect circle. Step 1, you want to buy oil? You got to get your hands on US dollars first. That keeps demand for the dollar sky high. Step 2, all those oil nations are now absolutely swimming in cash, right? We're talking trillions of these petrodollars. Well, what do you do with all that money? You need a safe place to park it. So what do? They plowed it right back into the US by buying treasury bonds. They were essentially loaning all that money back to America. And step 3, that constant flow of cash helped the US finance its government and kept interest rates low. It's this perfect loop. They call it petrodollar recycling for a reason.
Now, don't get me wrong. For the United States, this system was incredible. It stabilized the dollar and fueled decades of growth. But it absolutely came with a dark side. This deal was a classic double-edged sword. On one side, you had immense promise. But on the other, there was some serious danger.
I mean, look at this. The impact really was night and day. For the US, promise. It cemented the dollar as the king of all currencies, it funded economic growth, and it gave America huge global influence. But for everyone else, danger. The rest of the world basically became dependent on what the US decided to do with its economy. And worse, there were some, let's just say, explosive side effects that nobody really planned for.
Let's just take one of those dangers. These crazy regional arms races. This quote here really nails it. All of a sudden, countries like Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia had more money than they knew what to do with. And what did they spend it on? Weapons. A massive military buildup throughout the 70s. We're talking an estimated $80 billion in arms flooding into the Middle East in just under a decade. It was this deadly convergence, as they call it, of oil money and weapons dealers, and it lit a fire under conflicts that are frankly still burning today.
But the danger wasn't just about guns and tanks. It was financial, too. Remember that recycling machine? All those petrodollars pouring into Western banks? Well, banks don't just sit on money. They have to lend it out. And you can see right here on this chart where a lot of it went.
Look at those huge spikes in borrowing, especially for developing countries. This recycling machine basically created a global debt explosion. It was a party for a while, but it directly led to the massive debt crisis that blew up in the 80s.
So where did all this cash actually go? This table lays it out pretty clearly. Yeah, a big chunk went to international banks, the euro currency deposits. But just look at the single biggest destination for a country, the United States, almost $95 billion. That's over a quarter of the entire surplus. This right here is the proof. This was the fuel for that recycling machine we talked about. It shows you just how crucial the US economy became to the whole shebang.
All right, so for the better part of half a century, this system has been the quiet foundation of the global economy, the bedrock. But times are changing, the game is shifting, and today the whole petrodollar deal is facing some of its biggest challenges ever.
The very pillars that have held this whole thing up for 50 years, they're starting to shake. I mean, you've got major players like Russia and China actively trying to sell oil in their own currencies, which is a direct shot at the dollar's crown. There's this whole movement called de-dollarization, with countries trying to get out from under American financial influence. Then you have the energy game itself changing. The US is now a huge oil producer thanks to shale, so it doesn't need Middle Eastern oil as much. And maybe the biggest thing of all, the world just isn't a one superpower show anymore. So does a one superpower currency system still make sense?
Look, at the end of the day, the petrodollar system was a product of its time. It was born out of a specific crisis to solve a specific problem, and it created an economic order that has, for better or for worse, defined the world for half a century. But the world is changing, and it's changing fast. So we're left with this huge question. In this new era, with all these competing powers and new alliances, can a system that was built for a one superpower world actually survive? Can one single currency still rule them all? That, right there, is the trillion-dollar question hanging over the future of the entire